So thank you everybody for joining us today. You are here for today's BioRAFT EHS Community Connection webinar titled Designing Safety Training That Sticks. Right now with COVID going on, we have really lost in-person trainings and all of the energy that comes with that. And also people's brains are just more scattered. We're spending more time on our screens, more time on Zooms. It's harder for information to stick, and especially people are getting Zoom fatigue and video fatigue. So figuring out how we can still reach people with training, especially at a time when we're approaching everybody returning to their workplaces in full force, if you can get training done ahead of time, that will make that transition a lot easier because there is sure to be plenty of work that still needs to be done to accommodate that transition. So with us today, we have Kathy Irish and Jonathan Klane. I'd like the both of you to just say a quick hello. If you wouldn't mind giving an introduction, letting us know a little bit about yourselves, and also your experience with training. And once we go through that, we can kick off right into our questions. For our attendees, we have a great feature here on our Zoom webinar. That's the Q&A. If you go down to your Zoom webinar control panel, you'll see two little bubbles marked Q&A. And if you click that, you'll open up a window where you can go in and ask the questions you'd like our panelists to answer. We make sure that we enable thumbs up for questions. So if you see something you like, click the thumbs up, it'll help it float to the top. We'll know what we should answer first. And also we're allowing everybody to respond to each other's questions. So that way there can be side conversations, you can ask for clarification, you can provide more information. It doesn't really bottleneck the information with just us. We're trying to, with these webinars, create a space for everybody in the community to connect and share information. So I think these webinars are always just so much more fun and a lot more useful the more active that is. So feel free as the webinar is going. Now, any questions you have, pop them into the Q&A box. It'll be a lot easier to track and keep track of than putting them into chat where things can sometimes get lost. And I'll make a few reminders as we go. But yeah, Kathy, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much, Matt and BioRAFT, for letting me participate today. I feel like I'm crashing the party, I'll be honest, because my background is not in risk management or safety. My background is actually in human resources and learning and development. So I was thinking last night about preparing for this webinar, and I thought, wow, the first job I had when I was 15 and a half, working at Fritz's Frozen Custard, I was a trainer. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm still a trainer. So I've stuck with training, and hopefully we can talk about some things that will help your training stick. But I've been with EJ4 for 14 years, and EJ4 has been around since 2004. We create online micro-learning videos. So everything we do is video production based. We have studios here in St. Louis and in Kansas City. We have an off-the-shelf library of over 1,300 programs, and we create custom content. We also have an award-winning learning management system. And I really my background has always been in how can we take this human being, not just an employee, but this human being, and provide them with information so that they can be a better human being, whether that's at work or at home. So we're not just looking at this person, like I said, as an employee. We're saying, this person has a life outside of work, and it's hard not to bring those troubles back into work with you. So what can we provide to these people so they have better work-life balance, so they can be a better employee and have more success in their life?
Fantastic. I'm very excited to have you on, and it's always great to have that outside perspective on training and to have somebody who can maybe say, wait a second, why do you need that? What's the point behind that? And help us to reconsider some of those base assumptions that we can get caught up in when we're figuring out, like, how do I actually transmit this information? And for everybody who hasn't seen it yet, over on our webinar page, Kathy has very kindly shared, looks like 20 free courses on coronavirus precautions for employees, and also information on the costs of not training employees. So if you're looking for any resources around training, video content, or just justifications about, why do I need funds for training? Those are available there for you to go ahead and take a look at. And Jonathan, would you like to go ahead next?
Yeah, sure. I loved hearing Kathy's story about training people at 15 and a half. You have me beat by maybe a year or so. So, but I think we have a lot in common. It might not be hairstyle so much, but I think a deep history of actual learning. I think I'm more of a learning professional than I am an industrial hygienist at times. I spend a lot more time on it. So my start was as a water safety instructor. And that was everything from the real little kids to adults. And what I didn't know at the time, but was engaging in exactly what Malcolm Knowles, the father of adult learning, was getting at about self-directed learners. So my favorites were not actually the little kids, so much fun. It was the adults. And the reason is it was whatever they wanted to learn, which is exactly what andragogy, adult learning, is really all about. And you should search for Malcolm Knowles and Carl Rogers and read some of their stuff. And so, yeah, so teaching people, they always had a need, an applicable need that they needed right away. I want to feel more comfortable. I want to swim with my grandkids, et cetera, et cetera. It was very specific, and it was so rewarding being what, we would term more of a facilitator of their learning, which is really the spirit of it. So eventually I, went through college and got my degree in geology. And then I started teaching at a technical college in Maine, and I got hired to teach there full time. And my boss, the chair, said, "Hey, it's fine, but we would love it if you wanted to get a grad degree." And I was like, fantastic. I've always wanted to get one in, adult learning or adult education. So that's what I got my master's in back in the 90s at University of Southern Maine. And that just took my career path in this wonderful direction where I brought together, industrial hygiene, risk, et cetera, with a real strong focus on how do adults really learn. And it's just been a wonderful journey ever since.
Great. Well, I am very excited to dive into this topic with both of you. Just a reminder to everybody that as questions come up, go ahead and pop those into the Q&A tab. Guaranteed that if you're not sure whether your question is important enough, there are many other people who have the exact same thing, or it might spark some other discussions that could be really valuable. So don't be afraid to hold back there. We love getting that kind of engagement. So go ahead and participate. And to kick things off, Jonathan, Kathy, I'd like to ask you both the same question here to get just a little baseline. So what would you say is the most frequently missed opportunity or mistake for making effective safety training content, or just training content in general? And, Kathy, if you'd like to go first, if you want a little time to think through, I don't want to put you on the spot for this one.
Sure. I think in my world for HR, we have, regulatory compliance training videos, things that are mandatory that people in certain positions, they have to take. And the same is true with safety. I think one trap to fall into is, let's just get this done so it checks the box, right? That check the box mentality. So if OSHA comes through, we can say, yes, we provided training on that. And that doesn't get to changing the behaviors, which sounds like John and I are very excited about doing, giving people information so they can change the way they're doing things. So definitely not falling into that trap of, well, let's just hurry up and get something out there so we can say we had it, so we can, meet our compliance regulations. I would say that's a big one. Secondary to that is you have to engage your learner. I think so many times someone comes to you and says, we need training on XYZ. And you start going down the path of creating training for XYZ. And then you start talking with people who are involved in it. And they're like, well, no, you need training on ABC. You don't need training on XYZ. So really getting into that needs analysis and saying, here's truly what the learner needs, not what management thinks they need, but what the learner needs, and being able to provide that in an engaging way. So whether that's asking questions, giving scenarios, doing a pre-training test or a follow-up quiz, different ways that you can engage that learner. And from a video standpoint, whenever we create something, we're trying to hit as many learning styles as possible. So we have visual cues, we have audio cues, we have job aids, we have exam questions. And then to reinforce the learning, we have a tool called Fortify. So there's a thing out there called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which says after you attend a session or you're exposed to new information, after a period of time, a larger percentage of that information is forgotten if you're not applying it. So our Fortify tool combats that forgetting curve, where we send a participant a question 2 days after they finish, then 2 weeks, then 2 months. And the questions we ask are designed so they're pulling it from different parts of their brain. And the harder they have to think about it, it moves that information from their short-term to their long-term memory. And so quizzing them on that information and continually poking at them saying, hey, remember we did this. Then at the very final question, we give them a quick 2-minute video. It's either 90 seconds to 2 minutes that just is very quick overview of everything that they learned, again, hitting on those very important learning points. So again, it helps them move from that short-term to long-term memory.
And Jonathan, same question for you as well. Would you say that there are any major missed opportunities or mistakes that people can make when it comes to making effective training content?
Yeah. And I'm just going to piggyback right on top of what Kathy was saying. Really briefly, first though, the tool, I really like that because too often we give this quiz immediately after people watch, click through some training. And of course, the priming effect is they get it, but the reality is much deeper, of course, as Kathy was saying, including behaviors. Maybe think about Kirkpatrick's 4 levels or one of the better evaluative tools like Will Thalmeier's LTEM. And we can provide links for all of that later on. Mine, the biggest missed opportunity or mistake is, and Kathy mentioned this, which I love, is the needs assessment, a training needs assessment, or I would call it a learning needs assessment or analysis, right? And what's interesting is, as most of us are focused on compliance and OSHA and others, OSHA has a training requirements document, 2254, which one of us will post here in the chat or whatever. You can get the PDF online. And even in the introduction to that, they talk about the need to really determine first through a training needs assessment whether or not training is even the answer, because it clearly might not be. So here's a good example that I would offer. So let's say I get a request, and this is a true case. Let's say I get a request for someone says they need respiratory protection training. So of course, as an industrial hygienist and a trainer, that piques my curiosity. Okay, what's going on? Let me go and get some much better feedback from them. What's going on? Are they working with something new? Is there a problem with the fume hood? Are they working on the bench instead of in the hood? Are they using a snorkel that, snorkels are just not effective for a lot of things that require greater engineering controls? What's going on? So I go and visit pre-COVID and I talk, and what do I find out? I interview the researcher who had asked, and they said, well, we're using this substance and I've done, my due diligence and I've looked at the SDS and some other data, and it says it's a known or suspected sensitizer. I could develop an allergic reaction, and I'm really concerned about that. And to me, that's fantastic. I'm involved in another group where a person had an anaphylactic reaction to something not well known as a sensitizer. So this is a very, real issue. And I'm always supportive of people who feel the need to go further. So, okay, yeah, definitely that's the right path. Extra protection that a fume hood or whatever may not fully protect against. So now we've defined that, yes, their needs can be at least partially met through training, and the training should be on the correct selection, use, care of, and limitations of a respirator. What's the right one? Probably half-face negative pressure, perhaps. Maybe it's an N95, et cetera, right? These sorts of things. Could be a P100. Most of you probably know these jargonistic terms. So it's a fantastically important part, as Kathy said, to make sure that this is really something that can be addressed truly through training, and then from the needs assessment flow right into developing, crafting accurate, good, effective learning objectives. I hope that made sense to everyone.
Yeah, I really appreciate what both of you are saying here. I think there's that real element of, well, because you need to take it because it's required by law or regulation, that does my job for me. I don't need to worry about whether I make it compelling or whether I make it stick, because you have to pay attention. And of course, I think we're all very familiar with that human psychological trait of when you get told to do something, you just dig your heels in more and be more stubborn. So like, oh yeah, I'm going to learn something. Okay, yeah, sure, I'm going to learn it. Watch me be on my phone this whole time and then take the quiz 15 times until I, get it right. Yeah,
So true. So true.
Great. Quick thank you to the folks who've already found their way into our Q&A panel. Already seeing some great conversations going on in there, and very excited to address those later on in the webinar. Kathy, next question that I have is for you here. I was wondering, if COVID has taught us anything, it's that when you need to move fast, you really do need to move fast. There just is not time to say, great, we need to move fast. Now let's make sure we kind of slow down and figure out how we're going to do this. No, you have a timeline, meet it. So what knowledge can you share about creating training content that is on a shorter time frame?
That's a great question and so timely. I know last year when we first started hearing inklings about COVID, and it was still at that point where we were like, well, is it going to be in the US? My coworker Chris Sherding had planned a trip to France with her mom and her sister and her niece as a graduation present. And I was so nervous in the back of my head. I'm thinking, please don't go. Please don't go. You're not going to make it back. And unfortunately, they did have to cancel. And very soon after that, EJ4 decided as a company, we need to have everyone work from home. And this is very serious, and it very much is in the US. And I was walking in the park because that was still a socially distant thing that I could do. And my boss called and said, we need to create COVID content. And I said, but there's so much we don't know. Like, what do you want me to say? Stay inside. Don't touch your face. Like, what more can we say about it? But we started looking at it from the standpoint of, some organizations are going to get hit hard. And, maybe some of your organizations have been hit hard. We've seen companies have to close. So the urgency to get information out there quickly, to keep people safe, to keep businesses up and running, that was our priority. Thankfully, we've been creating videos since 2004. We have a very good system to create content very quickly. It takes us about 15 days to create a program from start to finish. So it was, let's divide and conquer. And some of us did work on the weekends to create the content, work with subject matter experts to make sure that we're releasing correct information, that we're not creating an environment of fear, and put some good resources out there so people could avoid fake news and really understand what was happening. So within about 2 weeks, we had probably 24 COVID specific programs that were created and launched, and we put on our website and also on YouTube, because at that point it wasn't about, hey, can we sell this? It was, this is what we need to do to be a good citizen, to be a good business, our social responsibility. So just having our process streamlined. We've been working right now on content for Six Sigma, and I've been looking at those process improvements, and I'm like, my gosh, our process is so great. It allows us to create things so very quickly. And I know you don't all have access to a studio. You don't all have access to a team of graphic designers and instructional designers and studio managers. So just creating the content and having it as done as possible but then moving the rest into continuous improvement mode. You know, it's kind of that mentality of it's 90% perfect, but it's 100% done. And that 10% can live in continuous improvement, and I can go out and I can make those updates. But having just a really good instructional design philosophy is going to help you, because then you can take the important pieces and kind of put it in your outline and create something very quickly. And, you know, I saw in the Q&A, someone asked, you know, what kind of systems do you use? You can go out and take a look at our videos, and you'll probably be shocked to know that we create all of that in PowerPoint. All of our videos are, you know, that basis is created in PowerPoint. So you can do a lot in PowerPoint where it doesn't even look like PowerPoint anymore. So I know some people, when they see a PowerPoint presentation, is like, oh my gosh, you know, the PowerPoint. No, it doesn't have to be like that. You know, don't go crazy and put a whole bunch of animations and word art and things like that in there, but you can still make a professional looking PowerPoint presentation, apply your instructional design, and still have a very nice training tool.
You can do some pretty incredible things with PowerPoint. I've gotten pretty deep into the tool, and it's amazing when there are a few particular things in terms of pathing animations and getting into the nitty gritty of how you control animation timing and entrance and exits and delays that can really accomplish, you know, a lot of things that a more powerful tool could do, like one of the Adobe Suite products. Kathy, I had a quick follow-up question for you about this process. This is a topic that came up, I think, back on our designing engaging training webinar we had a while back with, I want to say Brock Young talked about this from University of Nevada, Reno, how there's this challenge about, like, how do you get around the mindset holding you back from producing this content on a short notice, especially, you know, when COVID hit and people said, we need something. It's so easy to, you know, like you mentioned, get mired in, we don't know that much, or how do I make it perfect? And these attitude things that can sometimes hold us back more than the actual processes themselves. So have you found there have been any just particularly useful mental outlooks that have helped you stay focused on working past those little roadblocks that can sometimes hold you up and just bursting through them and saying, nope, we're going on to the next thing, we're going on to the next thing because I need to make this?
Yeah, so part of that, Matt, is you get to be the hero, right? You get to come in and save the day. You have a training for this, problem solved, right? So just having that mindset of, you know, this is what I was supposed to be doing. In the sense of COVID, it was also that social responsibility. You know, people were losing their lives, people were losing their livelihoods, people were being furloughed and laid off. So we started creating content for, how do I survive a layoff? How do I survive a furlough? And then we took it a step further and said, okay, well, some of these people are going to need to find new jobs. When was the last time they interviewed? Here's how you put together your resume. Here's how you interview on Zoom, because we're not doing face-to-face anymore. So that was the continual drive. And it goes back to that introductory question that you asked. We're not looking at these people as just employees. It has that ripple effect. So if Jonathan creates training and he's potentially saving someone's life, right? People don't think about that, but just a simple task of someone saying, oh, I have to take these boxes down to storage. I don't want to take 3 trips, so I'm going to stack them up top and walk down 3 flights of stairs. Worst case scenario, they could die, right? They drop, they fall down the stairs, they snap their neck, you know, they break their back, they're in a wheelchair. People aren't thinking about that. But John's training is saving lives. So anytime you can positively impact someone's work life, it has that ripple effect of, man, I feel good, right? I'm sitting up straight, I'm having a great day. I'm more successful when I go home. Maybe I'm in a better mood, so I have better interactions with my family and my friends. So stop looking at it as just this, oh, I had to do HAZWOPER training today. It's, you just had the potential of positively impacting not this person's work, but their entire self-worth by giving them the tools they need to do their job. So that might be too HR pie in the sky, but that's really what fuels me. How can I put information in people's hands so they can change their behaviors and better their lives, not their work, but better their lives?
Yeah.
I think you're giving me far too much credit, Kathy.
And I think that's a really important perspective. Now in COVID, I think we've seen a huge shift in scientific health and safety from thinking about a lot of people as, maybe the safety officer, right? Or somebody checking a box, you're in compliance or trying to fight against liability, to really seeing, wow, the things I do on a day-to-day basis have a major impact on people's lives, not just on their risk of injury, but mental health that gives them the kind of fortitude and resilience to bounce back after something, really terrible happens. And that matters a lot. And we have this incredible position to reach a lot of people. And it's great when safety is one of those tools you can use, and training is one of those tools you can use to reach more folks.
Can I jump in and just piggyback on quickly, Matt, on a couple of things Kathy said? So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, I'm one of the biggest fans of learning and good, effective learning and everything that we're here talking about, of course. But I also, and there's a place for it where it can absolutely save people's lives. So years and years ago, I had to do some training on silica and silicosis for some masons. And so by masons, these are people who work with, concrete blocks and bricks and mortar and stuff that's just chock full of crystalline silica. And these guys have been at it for a while. They were not newbies to the field whatsoever. And it was just two guys in a trailer, and I was just having a conversation with them. And I started talking about this and the history of silica and silicosis and what it can do to the lungs and explaining it. And their jaws just kept getting, and literally they had never heard of silicosis. And for us, it just blows our mind because it's like, how can you not? So it's, at that level, you can make such, as Kathy's saying, a huge, huge impact on them. Now, I want to briefly make sure that we also all admit the training is no panacea, and it's not very good at changing behaviors. I had a Title IX. So if you know what Title IX is all about, right? Let's not do any sexual harassment or anything worse than that. So I was having a great conversation and I brought up this point, and she said, oh my God, John, yes, I will be absolutely the first to say that training is a terrible tool to change behaviors, right? And she's talking about some of, the most important, at times egregious behaviors that we're talking about. So there's this real duality of it. It's incredibly powerful, but it also has limitations. And for me, and I think Kathy as well, and a lot of us here in this community, it comes down to how do we construct it so that we make it as effective as we can. So as a lot of the Q&A is getting at, so it's not a checkbox mentality. So it's not a click through, take the quiz, be done sort of a thing. And I really think that's really where everything that we're talking about today is coming from.
And to kind of bring everything back together here, the reason we're talking about these things on our Designing Safety Training That Sticks, why are we talking about how training impacts people's lives and saves their lives, or, these stories we can tell about safety? And it's because while these perspectives are important, what they really do is they fuel you as the safety content creator and the training content creator to give you the tools to actually connect with these people. Like these stories and these connections and this passion is what is going to help your training content really stick with people. When you tell these people about silicosis and their jaws just drop and they keep going and they think, oh my God, I had no idea, that sticks. They are going to remember that lesson. And, honestly, they're probably going to go and pass it on to their friends who might not have this training. You're going to increase your reach and expand that to people who you'd never be able to help because they're outside of your organization. Or maybe they didn't get identified for training and they're getting that exposure, or they're doing a home project and they have no idea. That is what makes the training stick. So when we talk about these sort of higher level, more abstract things, I want to make sure we're also remembering, these are actually the tools that are going to help this content, in addition to these more strategic and tactical techniques of reinforcing them through questions afterwards and making those short-term learnings more long-term really stick around with people and expand your reach. So Jonathan, next question here is for you. I was wondering, personalizing connection is particularly hard when in-person trainings are not an option. We spoke about this a little bit at the beginning of the webinar. So I was wondering if you could tell us some ways that you would try to meaningfully connect with the learner and still, make that connection like we've been talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And again, it's funny to see similarities between even the language that Kathy and I use. So making connections with the learners, I think we would probably use the term learner engagement. And that really, I'll sort of take it into the two parts of it as I see it. And I certainly would love to hear from Kathy as well, because I know this is a passion for her as well, right? So one aspect is really how do we increase this relatability between the, I'm going to say the facilitator, as opposed to the trainer, a term that we prefer to use in learning circles, and the learners, right? And we know that this is important. We know that there's a certain amount of bonding that usually occurs. We know that, how did you like they usually use the term trainer, whatever. The trainer today in those smile sheets, right? The Likert scales, you get more of the big smiles or the higher ratings. And part of it has nothing to do with what they've learned. It has to do with this relatability. But we know that there's this really important relationship that if I like the facilitator, trainer, whatever, I'm more likely to engage in it. I mean, that's been studied well. So it's an important aspect. And so it's by being open and fun and engaging and doing some of the typical self-deprecation that we do. We only make fun of ourselves, for instance. We laugh at other people's jokes. We, talk about how terrible our own joke was or whatever. We use people's names. It's those sorts of things that are more on the soft skills side that a lot of people go, wow, that really works. There's a certain art as well as a science to this. And then the other half of this is really, well, I'm stuck with, I'm in a virtual environment, I'm staring, they're looking back, they might have their screens off, I might not even be able to see them, the platform might not support that, etc. It might be more of a webinar. And I always say, you know what, sorry, screw it, I don't care. I am going deep in, I am talking to people, I'm following the chat, I'm using their names, I'm saying, oh my God, Tasha, that's great. Thank you so much for doing that in the chat. I'm laughing about it, I'm making jokes, I'm having this weird conversation where I'm the only person talking, but they're also communicating back, maybe through the chat. Now that's if it's synchronous like today. If it's asynchronous, meaning I'm a recording, right, which is even more, then we can still make it engaging. I can make it as if I'm talking. It's like watching a YouTube video, right? The person doesn't lecture, they talk to you. They assume you are there in front of them and they have a conversation and they do all of these sorts of things. They can't do all of it, but they still do a lot of that. And we know scientifically very, very well. The more, so now we're back to the term, engaged, participative the learner is, how active is the learner. Passive learning, forget it. Active learning, yes, that's what we all want. So I think those are some of the great ways we get animated, we get passionate, all of that sort of stuff. It really helps hold on to the learner, get them engaged, get them involved, and have them be part of the conversation.
Kathy, I see a lot of nodding going on over there.
Yes, we are definitely kindred here. I've always said, if you have a great facilitator, people think that comes naturally, that you just can go up there and do it. They don't understand how labor intensive it is because it's all that Jonathan talked about and even more. Now moving to more webinar, more Zoom, where you can't feed off of the audience. Where's that energy? You have to bring that. But it's also, there's some comfort in knowing that we are all professional TV watchers. We've turned to Netflix. We can, binge a series in 2 days. I'm not saying you should do that with training because, cognitive load, you're not going to remember everything, but We're professional TV watchers. Think of the, Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. Think of how long they've been on. And you're screaming at the TV. What is gold? What is gold? That's the answer. Why you don't know it? You're playing along. You're not winning anything. You're not betting any money. You don't get, the showcase with all the fabulous prizes, but you're still participating in that. So there's hope that, we don't all have to turn into Vanna Whites and Pat Sajaks, but I think John and I do a pretty good job.
Wait, who's who? Am I Pat or am I Vanna?
Anything. I'm not going to assume anything. But there's some comfort in knowing that you can ask those questions. And even though people might not feel comfortable answering on screen, they're at least thinking about it up here. So you still have to go through that process of, I know I'm going to ask this question and I might get dead air, but I'll wait a little bit and then I'll answer it myself and see if I can get anyone else to piggyback on top of that. So it's just feeling comfortable trying those new things and building in breaks. And like Jonathan said, sometimes you have to just take your script and say, okay, here's what we're doing because this is what this audience needs, and feeling comfortable doing that.
The energy that you bring to these things is absolutely going to get mirrored back to you. So if you have apprehension, if you're concerned, those are all very understandable, but people are going to sense that and feed off of it. You have to bring so much to these presentations where the term I like to use is talking into the void, right? You have no idea how many people are listening. You have no idea who's responding. You don't have that, the facial expressions or the sort of general energy of a room to feed off of. And that's difficult. It helps to be well rested. It helps to have, a meal ahead of time or sort of have a set of rituals you do, little things like I always get my drinks before these, kind of make sure my background looks good. I have a checklist that I do. Those are really helpful. Sometimes standing can make a huge difference in the way you speak and your energy and the way your body and face are, and that all helps. But it's harder. It's definitely harder to do. And the thing that's nice is when you do it well, the effort that you put in is immortalized. It's there. You don't have to do it again, and people can enjoy that, and you can just move on to the next thing. All right, I think we have time for one more question here before we switch over to the Q&A. So Kathy, I'd like to send this one over your way. Wondering if you could share an easy to implement tip or trick you think would help our audience build more effective and better training.
Excuse me, I think it goes back to what Jonathan said. With training, I can provide the information to you, right? But I can't walk behind you every day and say, Matt, are you doing what I trained you to do? Matt, are you doing it? Are you doing it?
That's the premium subscription, right?
Premium services.
Yeah.
So it's creating those opportunities to reinforce the training, because whether it's a live training session and they have a binder and they took notes, they put that binder on their shelf and they might remember some of it, but that book's not going to fall out and say, hey, turn to page 20 because you're struggling right now. So it's creating those moments where we can reinforce it with follow-ups. Like I said, with the training reinforcement we do, even creating, there's so many free survey tools out there, creating, like using SurveyMonkey and creating a few follow-up quizzes to send to your participants just to, poke, so they move that from their short-term to their long-term memory, would be great. That's one big thing that, we've worked on to try and continue to develop and get people to train, to change their behavior. So I would say I would really focus on how can we reinforce the training that we've just spent. It's a 4-hour session, but you spent 6 months putting it together. Don't let that go to waste. Don't let it go to waste. Create some reinforcement around it. And it doesn't have to be incredibly elaborate. Like I said, sign up for a free survey tool and start sending out some questions to your participants.
And I'm sure there are some people out there who are hearing that advice and thinking, oh my God, but how do I possibly track all the people who took these trainings when and then follow up with them at the right times? That's going to take so much email and so much work. And the real answer is we are past that technologically. That should all be automated. That shouldn't be something you have to remember or think about or put any real effort into outside of setting it up, because you have more important things to do with your time. than try and be some sort of Excel jockey and email jockey to send out, a bunch of disparate emails all the time to try and help reinforce these things. So if that is feeling a little bit, too burdensome, there are absolutely better ways of doing it. Well, it is 2:46 here, sorry, 2:46 Central, 3:46 Eastern. Other time zones adjust appropriately. So we're going to go ahead and transition over to the live Q&A portion of today's webinar. But before we do, I'd like to give a quick plug for our upcoming events. Next week, we have one of our drop-in problem solving sessions. These are just 1 hour sessions where Jonathan and I get together. We just bring people live on air, talk to them, let them talk out their challenges. It's a really nice way to, come with something that you're struggling with, even if it's just a rant. We had one really nice conversation with somebody who was, feeling overwhelmed about not having enough resources. And I think it entered into a lot of great conversations about what you can do about that and just how to feel better about doing good work when you're feeling overloaded. Then coming up in 2 weeks, we have a webinar about how to engage your scientists in safety, really taking advantage of the ownership of safety that we've been seeing thanks to COVID. After that, breaking down internal barriers to safety, getting into how do you navigate internal politics and help people see how safety helps them and isn't just, like we've talked about, a compliance tool checkbox to be checked. And our newest one, peroxide formers. This is a topic that's come up a number of times over the course of our webinars and other conversations. Know that there's a lot of questions about how do we track and train and dispose of these and handle calls about ones that may have crystallized. So we'll hopefully answer some of those questions and really cover some of the difficulties there. And then, of course, as we're answering, feel free to go ahead and participate in this week's poll. Tell us about a recent win. It's great to hear all of the things that people are proud of, what they're working on. Lots of COVID vaccinations happening, people getting big projects finished, getting their gardens up and running. Just feeling, I think, a lot more alive now that we're finally through winter for the most part and into spring and feeling like there's a light ahead. So love to see these. We'll definitely be coming back to it. And then before we go ahead to our Q&A, I'm just going to launch a poll for everybody. So these are the EHS community connection webinars. We rely heavily on you, our community, to keep them going and to keep our topics relevant. We care a lot about making sure we're bringing you information that's important for you. So please go ahead, fill out this poll, let us know what topics you'd like to see, anything coming up. Also, we rely on our panelists to donate their time and energy to making these webinars possible, to creating the space where we can have this kind of discussion on the side and during it, to help share this information. So we're always in need of more panelists. If you or somebody you know in your network might be a good fit, please let us know. We'll be reaching out. And if you're interested in one of our upcoming drop-in sessions where you'll be coming on, we'll get to talk with you live, kind of like car talk, but a little bit less funny. Go ahead and mark that down. Let me know if you have any questions. We can definitely figure that out afterwards. So I will leave that up for a little bit while we move on to our Q&A here. So our first question is from Tasha. Tasha asks, we have the issue of the checkbox mentality as well as only doing what is mandated by OSHA. There is resistance to move past this mentality due to budget. So how do we move past that? It sounds like, a pretty common thing, right? People are always struggling to get safety the kind of priority and resources that it needs. So what have you two found to be helpful in that particular regard of getting funding for safety or for training rather?
Well, one is just research and data. I just read an article this week that Microsoft did a survey of 30,000 workers around the world and found that 40% of those surveyed are considering leaving their jobs this year. So just this standpoint of, have you really calculated the cost of bringing in a new hire? The recruiting, the training, any certifications, benefits. Once they're there, you have an opportunity to recoup that by providing them with great training. People leave organizations because they don't know how to do their job. They're not trained effectively. So being able to provide training to increase their stay, so you're not losing this money that you just spent on bringing new people in the organization, then there's that knowledge that people have because they've been in their jobs for so long. Can you put a price tag on that? So are you willing to risk losing someone who's been there for 5 years and knows the ins and outs of the organization and can do things, almost automatically? Are you willing to lose that knowledge that you haven't documented because they're just great at doing their job? So the cost savings alone, I know Matt had mentioned there's a resource out there on the cost of not providing training. And this was an ebook that we produced. And I think it's either number 5 or number 6 in that ebook specifically looks at safety and says, here are the direct costs, here are the indirect costs. Is your organization willing to risk this dollar amount by simply checking the box? So looking for research and data points like that and continually building your case, that's the route I would take. John, I don't know if you have additional insight.
Yeah, no, I'll just pick up your thread here and just go a little bit more. I agree. This whole issue of checkbox mentality, it comes out of many things. Training is just one, inspections, et cetera, can be another. So a quick little micro story. I was having a conversation with a Sigma 6 black belt guy, meaning, process improvement. His job was director at a very large institution for performance excellence. He had nothing to do with safety or risk or anything else like that. He's like, no, my job is, when we have a bad day, it's, a student or whatever calling in and not getting help on a course. The worst thing that happens is this student feels bad about it, or maybe if it's a prospective student, they're not going to come. And he knew what I did. We actually had one thing in common, shiny head. And he said to me, but in your field, Jonathan, if people do the checkbox, the bad thing that can happen is people can die. And so, he and I bonded over this, that we're both striving towards helping various institutions inside and outside, not just achieve excellence, but effectiveness, which may or may not have to do with efficiencies. That's really just a small part of it. But how do we get to the outcomes that we really want? And the outcomes that we really want are a learning organization and people wanting to learn, and self-directedness, and making sure people have the opportunity to engage in very meaningful learning opportunities and things of that nature that may or may not have anything really to do with clicking through slides, as we're all getting at, right? And so that's really what we're striving for. And given this, and the stories are endless, right? Some are learning things, and some results of very bad things are not learning things, right? And we can look at all of the history in research institutions and everywhere. How is it that these sorts of things happen? And there's a multitude of reasons. Learning, training, et cetera, is one important slice of that overall pie. And so it's to really try to help people reframe how they're looking at the problem statement, which is, how do we become truly effective and get the outcomes that we want, and not through this unilateral tunnel vision of I'm trying to comply with a regulation and make sure that my results of how many people took this PowerPoint ClickFest are high enough that everything looks okay from the surface.
Yeah. Well, Tasha, hopefully that was helpful. And of course, as we click this question, just as answered live, it's going to be over in the answered tab of the Q&A panel. So you can still have side conversations there. Looks like Stacey had a nice follow-up, so feel free to continue that conversation as we move on to our next question. So here we have one from Michael saying, my training development department consists of me. How do I relate to others who supervise me that creating online content takes time, especially when they want the content to be graphic and entertaining? So yeah, I'll cue that up for both of you. I know personally, having made some educational content recently, boy, to make good stuff, it is staggering how much is behind that for that very short, whatever amount of time it is. multiplied so much.
Yeah, I will say those that are in training and development, man, we're resourceful. One person team, okay, I'll do it, right? Because you're dedicated to your employees. You want to make sure that you're providing them with the information they need. So, having those shoestring budgets and the demands from higher up, and you want to say, do you want to come sit in my seat and try this? And then you'll understand how difficult it is. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. And, I know partnering with an online provider, I don't know if that would alleviate some of that. I know there's budget constraints there, but we provide a complete solution. EJ4 is part of the HSI company, and I know we have a growing library of readily available online training programs. And maybe it would fit your budget, but being able to partner with a vendor is something I think you're going to need to do, because again, it can take up to 3 months to create training, but there's a need for it right now, right? So, well, I'll get to it in 3 months, and then that priority changes, and then you have to scrap what you were working on. And we've all unfortunately lived through the changing priorities of that. And unfortunately, you don't have a large team to support you. So just trying to find some good tools. Like I said, PowerPoint, having a good authoring tool. We have a free authoring tool through our LMS that it's so easy, even I can use it. That's my plug for it. It's so easy, even I can use it and actually edit it. But it's that question of, do you want it good, fast, or cheap? Well, I want all three, right? You're gonna have to make some decisions there. So again, providing cost analysis of, here's what it takes, here's my timeline, here's how we could accelerate it. And unfortunately, it sounds like you're going to be having to arm yourself to fight that battle. So I'm available on LinkedIn. So if there's anything I can help you with, I certainly will.
And Michael, also feel free to sign up for our next week's session. That's exactly the sort of thing that Jonathan and I love, being able to have some more back and forth, learn a little more specifics about your situation so we can offer more tailored advice. It's always a little difficult to have really be able to help fully when it's a little bit more of a one-way conversation like these webinars. So we tried to make a space that can have more of a dialogue be present.
Yeah. I'll jump in and just add an example of I think how I would probably approach this problem, which is, they obviously can't see what goes on in the black box if you're doing it. So why not do a side-by-side demonstration for them? And so pick your own. Create some very small niche training. Does not have to be safety related. If you wish, go in a different direction, maybe that'll be more relatable to them. And do it in 2 or more different ways. Maybe there's a middle ground too. And so design this small thing and design it as quickly as you can, etc. So it's going to be just strictly, stripped down PowerPoint ClickFest. And then again, making it as small as possible to make this easier, make it engaging and give them a small bulleted list of, here are the different things I had to do. Here's how much time it took me to do this, rather not so great training. And then here's what it takes for me to do this. And if this is what you want, and this over here is what you don't want, and it took me an hour to do this little lousy thing, and it took me 16 hours to do this really nice engaging thing, and think about the difference that this will make. Think about how people will take it and will feel about the quality and the value that this service adds to it, which of course just adds to everything else, and go in other directions in addition to the amount of time. What are the value add benefits that we might not perceive right away? And just do that side by side. And if there's a middle version, then go for that as well, right? And then, show that and let them pick and choose, what they want and see how that goes. That would be, for me, how I would try to do a demonstration project for them on a small scale.
Yeah, just to build off that quickly before we move on. In addition to that, going in with the attitude of, I want to make you aware of a problem. And the problem is I'm spending a lot of time on this. And if this is how, once I've laid everything out, you want me to be spending my time, then okay, great, we're on the same page. But I also think I could be using my time more valuably. And here are some ways to do that. And I think it's, positioning it as you and the people who supervise you on the same side of the problem of helping you work efficiently and getting the most out of your expertise, and not just hemorrhaging time and value everywhere. So that can be a nice way of framing, okay, maybe it does make sense. It's easy to look at something and think, oh, we don't have money, so we're going to make it in-house because that will save us time. And almost always in these situations, when you're asking specialists to do something outside of their field of specialty, it is not worth it financially when you look at how much that's costing you an opportunity cost or increasing risk by not being able to do other more important things. Right, I'm going to move on here to our next question. It looks like Carmen is having some great conversations here with some other attendees about accessibility and compliant training. So Carmen asked, what platform do you use to prepare your trainings? How do you make accessibility compliant training? Looks like there's some conversations about PowerPoint. Joe mentioned Vivid here, and Matt is talking about using Adobe Captivate as well. So are there any pieces of software platforms that you two find helpful, or just guides or places you look for compliant training?
So we create everything, like I said, in-house in our 2 green screen studios in St. Louis and Kansas. So we create all of our scripting in Word. We create all of our backgrounds and, training content in PowerPoint. And then if we use any, Adobe or Photoshop for After Effects or things of that nature. We've used Storyline for some specific customer requests and Articulate. I feel like if you've used one of them, you've used all of them. They're all very, very similar in their templates and what you can and can't do. I was reading through the Q&A, and it looks like a lot of people had some similar input on that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think a lot of the common players, that you find in these discussions, do work very strongly on making things. I think it's 508 compliant. And Kathy, maybe you know the number, right? That is, so it's a little bit even beyond ADA requirements for how do we make things truly accessible for all sorts of people. And so if you go to some of those different, they're often called in a generic form authoring tools, and SCORM, SCORM, is the acronym that's often used about the software. So if you do a search for, comparison of authoring tools, I was just doing a little bit on the side here. There's a bunch of them out there, some of whom I'm sure you've heard of, others you may not. There's good side-by-side comparisons. Some only work on Macs, and some will work on PCs. So and some you can get a free trial, as we do with most things, at a basic level. So all of these, if you're building your own, what I would encourage you to do, I've done it before myself, is figure out what your needs are, figure out what you're hoping for, your limitations. Look at a few of these side-by-side comparisons, make your own notes, make your own little chart of the things that apply to you. Really keep it basic, but keep it specific to your needs and your abilities. And then, decide which of those tools is probably going to be the best fit in your case. Or if you're not going to do it yourself, which, might be the best answer, then look towards some of these providers, such as EJ4 and Vivid and some of these others, because they've done a lot of this heavy lifting. They have staff who are instructional designers and technology experts to really, and learning professionals, as Kathy is, right, to really put this together for you. And I truly hope that sort of approach helps people.
And just to piggyback on that, I know there are so many free trials you can sign up for to see, is this really going to work for me? Does it really do everything it says it does? It slices and dices, and does it really? Let's take a look. And even a lot of training providers have free trials that you can go in and try it on and see if their style is going to fit for your organization and for your learning ecosystem. So those are some great resources available.
Mm-hmm. I like that it slices and dices it, just, Bronco, right?
Exactly.
So somehow it is already past 4 p.m. Eastern here. We have just blazed through our time. We still have a bunch more questions here in the Q&A. So this is the point where I just want to say, before everybody who needs to go heads out, a huge thank you to our panelists for spending your time and energy to create the space for everybody to have these conversations, to share your information and expertise, and also to just bring all this energy. It's not easy finding more time and more energy during the pandemic to contribute to these. So we really appreciate it deeply. If you're able to stay on for another 5 or so minutes, we can go ahead and address a few more questions in the Q&A. And if not, and you need to go, situation has changed, no problem at all. And I'm sure everybody here really appreciates the effort that you've put in.
Well, thank you. I do need to leave, but thank you, Matt. Thank you, BioRAFT. John, it was wonderful presenting with you. Thank you to all of the participants. And like I said, I am available on LinkedIn. So if you have a specific question for me, please feel free to reach out to me there, and I'll get in touch with you as soon as I can.
Good chatting.
Sounds great. Thanks, Kathy. Have a great rest of your day and a good weekend. Enjoy the chicken, what is it? Chicken nugget report?
Chicken nugget report.
Yeah.
Yep.
Prize. I want a copy of that. Pre-publication version.
I'll have them create a short training video.
Yeah, would you please? Oh my God, that's so funny.
As long as it comes with the samples.
Yes.
All right, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Yeah, and of course I'll hang out, Matt, and so whatever Q&A you'd like to do, I'm happy to, for whatever time period we decide.
All right, yeah, sounds good. We've got another 8 or so minutes here. So taking
Sure.
another quick look as we go through the responses here, just everybody sharing their weekly wins, letting us know what they're happy about. It's nice to kind of see what's bringing people light and happiness right now as we're coming around the bend on winter here. So the next question is from Jack, asking, what are some strategies to make safety, not compliance, training effective when delivered via online learning systems when compared to instructor-led or group or interactive learning? Do we have to move to virtual or augmented reality trainings to achieve that combination of convenience and effectiveness?
So I love the question. I think VR, AR, virtual reality, and augmented reality are great opportunities, not necessarily for everything, but there's some great advancements going on. So here's an example I'll use for where I would love to see VR training, and not that that's what we have to do, as the question was asking, do we really have to? But let me start with that and work backwards here. So I was actually at a conference and I was talking with a researcher doing some real cool advanced stuff several years ago with VR. And I said, here's what I want to use it for. I've got to get people trained on HF, hydrofluoric acid, and pyrophorics. Really, and I had to explain to him, he's not a safety professional, and explain to him what they were and the basics. And he's like, oh my God, that's crazy stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's the sort of stuff we deal with. But VR is great for allowing people to be okay and make mistakes, right? And, get used to how to do things in a very safe manner. We all know this, we learn best from what goes wrong. We learn better from our mistakes, and we want, in training, there's value in working into the training mistakes, but they've got to be safe mistakes. And with HF and pyrophorics live, you can't, right? So that is obviously a great application of the incredible advantages of this augmented or virtual reality. And then, this whole compliance versus effectiveness and outcomes is really, I think, the rest of that question. And it's a lot of the previous stuff that Kathy and Matt and I have been chatting about, is saying, look, compliance is merely that we've met the OSHA regulations, but it's not accomplishing nearly what we need to be accomplishing. And then you go through some of that. And so how do we become effective? And how do we make sure that the training the learning is actually transferred, and not by some, 10 question multiple choice quiz given on the heels of the training where they're 100% primed and they can take it multiple times, right? And so it's really looking at what are the outcomes that we really want. And I think the last thing I would mention that I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar is look at different evaluation tools. So Kirkpatrick is a popular one, but even Kirkpatrick's has deficiencies in it. And so I would suggest looking at Will Thalmeier's LTEM, LTEM, as a more novel approach to measuring effectiveness and evaluation of learning transfer, and that we're getting the outcomes that we want. I think that's absolutely the direction to go. And I hope that helps.
Hopefully as well, there will be more of a widespread availability of VR and AR tools as that becomes a little more mainstream.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I love technology where it's helpful. I think we all know that we have an over fondness for technology, and we tend to think technology is going to somehow solve our problems or be our savior, and it's not. And so I really encourage this. Let's go back to the roots of what we're trying to do, adult learning. How is it effective? And what is it we're truly trying to accomplish here?
So we have 3 more minutes here. We've got one question from Chris here that we can get to before we head out. So Chris asks, if training is considered generally ineffective at influencing behavior, what are some techniques for getting as much behavioral mileage as possible out of our training? What should we be doing in addition to training to get the behavioral changes we're trying to achieve? So I'm sure if Kathy were here, she'd definitely talk about those reminders, those quizzes to help, transform that short-term knowledge to long-term knowledge. Those seem like a really fantastic idea. But, the time we have left, do you have any other quick ways of getting the most out of your training?
Yeah, I mean, obviously follow-up, supervision, obviously culture, safety culture, et cetera, being a learning organization, psychological safety, meaning trust, and I can speak up about anything and not worry about it being slammed down or something. But in the last 2 minutes, I'll tell you what I think is the most powerful tool we have to really embed a lot of this and get people to relate, and the power of how we make sense of things. Stories. Got to be telling stories. And the quick story is this. Pre-COVID, you're on a plane. There's a guy next to you who's watching some movie on his device, and he's experiencing what he would call body-racking sobs. His whole body is heaving. And you ask, is he okay? And he says, oh, I'm so sorry. It's $1 Million Baby. It's a very, sorrowful movie. Well, what you don't know is he's Dr. Paul Zak, a well-known researcher in oxytocin. And so Dr. Zak says, I wonder, and he does a bunch of studies, and what does he discover with a control group and another group is that the more highly emotional storytelling of the information through pre and post blood samples, he discovers that first there's exposition of a story, then action building. During that phase where it gets really tense, we end up getting cortisol, because we get so tense and stressed out. At the peak, at the climax of the story, we get a shot of oxytocin, the human bonding, the love chemical from a very good story. And then the downside, and then finally that wonderful heartfelt Disney ending. Then we get a shot of dopamine, a feel-good chemical. So the power of stories, and I could go on, but I won't, is so wonderful and powerful. We need to use those more. If you didn't know that, that was your excuse before. Now, you got no excuses. Follow up more, engage with me if you'd like, shoot me an email. I'm happy to talk more about this. Stories are the way to make things real, bond us together, and have people understand the emotional side of how we do things through our cognitive biases and the experiential or emotional risk system that we use and operate through.
Yeah. All right. Well,
so
thank
much
you. A little shot of neuroscience there. And Chris, thank you for your question. We are here at the end of our time. So now is the time to say goodbye. A huge thank you to Jonathan and Kathy, who has since departed, for their time. I definitely feel very strongly all these challenges about creating content. I actually just finished a little explainer video for the company that if anybody's curious to watch, it's available on our homepage. I'm going to go toss a link into the chat just in case you're curious and want to see. But man, I had my own experiences recently of just how difficult it is to make something really good that compresses a lot of information into a small space. So a huge thank you to everybody for joining us. Feel free to reach out with any questions. I hope to see you on a future webinar and on our drop-in session next week. Coming with questions, we can keep it really lively and have, again, more of a dialogue and dig into what your challenges are to help you, more than just the single question available. So I hope you all have a fantastic day, a great weekend, and we will be seeing you again shortly.
Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful. I look forward to more conversations. And thank you so much, Matt, for everything you do behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jonathan. And have a great day. I'll see you all later.